I don't know about you, but when I sneeze, it feels like the whole world shakes and gravity doesn't exist. That was the most aggressive in recent memory. Perfect as I dive into recording all these intros for a conversation within the old What Was That Radio YouTube account today. Well, hey, thank you so much for being here, for goodness sake. What Was That Radio is all about discovering modern rock. I spent 10 years in commercial modern rock radio. I live to be in the moment, to constantly discover. That's what Was That is all about after I stepped out of it. But one of my friends that I made in that realm is Alan Cross, as far as I'm concerned, a Canadian legend of rock broadcasting. He celebrated his 40th year in broadcasting just the week before we spoke. And I was really interested to discuss how he feels radio is in this moment, where it might go in the future, and of course, just how he goes about being Alan Cross and the clinical creative technician that he is in forever supplying the context behind some galvanizing artists from around the world. As my voice changes into a different caricature. Anyway, I appreciate you being here. You can find out more about What Was That Radio at whatwasthatradio.com. Here's a conversation with Alan Cross.
Ah, there we go.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm slouching back in my chair because I have a very badly wrenched shoulder, and I need something to support me. So, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not being rude.
No, I wouldn't think it was rude either way. I mean, you've got to be what's comfortable, do what's good for you. We can just make this the lean back interview.
Yes, we'll do that.
So congratulations, firstly, on 40 flipping years, Alan. 40 years in commercial broadcasting.
I have no idea how I managed to do that. I really do not. It's just that the years slipped by, and when I looked at the calendar and I realized that 40 years had gone by, I was absolutely shocked. I never expected to be doing this 40 years after I started. And, well, and I don't see any reason that I'll start, and I don't see any reason that I'll stop anytime soon.
Yeah, I read your article with globalnews.ca, who you write for an awful lot, and you'd said, quote, "My first taste of sitting behind a microphone came in 1980 in my first year at the University of Winnipeg. Back then, CKUW was a minuscule closed-circuit operation, broadcasting to one hallway and one cafeteria. You wrote, my shift was at 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. on Friday mornings, which guaranteed a listenership of pretty much zero."
It was, yes. Anybody who showed up at university on Friday morning was an idiot.
But what intrigues me, I mean, we could dive back in and we could discuss. I really appreciate that you've given me an hour, but I think the first thing that would be good to gauge just how busy you are is, what is a regular day like for you?
That's a good question. It begins with I get up at 7 every morning, and what I do is I'm at my desk by 7:30. And the first hour and a half is spent going through all my newsletters and email, trying to find out what the music news of the day is. I have my website, and what I do is pick stories from that morning's newsletters and that morning's web surfing, post those as stories on my website. Those stories then sometimes get recycled in a daily radio show that I do that runs from 7 till 8 o'clock every day on the Edge in Toronto. The other ones may end up being recycled as ongoing history material later on. And what else are used for? And sometimes they end up being recycled into global news columns as well. So the idea for that first hour and a half is to collect and analyze as much music news as I possibly can. And then I'll continue to do that throughout the day. But the morning is the big one. I then put together this radio show, which I send off via Dropbox. It's produced and put in the system. And then after that, I have a series of Instagram posts, writing that I do for ongoing history, writing that I do for other people, and that takes up the rest of the day. And I try to finish around 4, although it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I'll go back to work after supper just to tidy up a few things, and then I'll do a few things on the weekend. Evenings are usually reserved for family, although there have been many times where I have to go out and do something, some sort of event, hosting something, attending something, that kind of thing. It's a lifestyle. It's certainly not a job.
Yeah, because that's what fascinates me, and I think we're going to sort of focus on mainly is not necessarily take a walk back these 40 years, but look at the growth of the 40 years to the present moment. You know, for me, in stepping away from commercial radio and building What Was That, it was built from a lust, like I said to you in email, of just wanting to continue to grow, just wishing to push myself as an individual to see what I could achieve. And that's what's so fascinating with you, is that you've juggled so many roles and so many things for so long now, and the flow is so important. And so you're like, I want to start at 7, I want to be done by 4. That is not obtainable every day. How do you manage yourself and treat yourself mentally if there is a day that overruns, and maybe it then bites into time with your family and with your dogs?
First of all, getting enough sleep. And secondly, making sure that your body and your mind is capable of periods of extreme endurance. So I go to a personal trainer 3 times a week to make sure that I'm in physically good condition so that for these long days, I can handle it. Other than that, again, it's more of a lifestyle and a series of habits that have come into play where this is just how it is. This is the mission. These are the things I need to get done, and there's no excuse for not getting them done. Now, I am an independent contractor. I don't work for any one person, although Chorus Radio is my biggest client. So I am responsible for everything to do with my working environment, the hours that I keep, the work that I churn out, the work that I choose to do based on offers that come my way, the work that I have to do based on any contracts I may have with vendors or with suppliers. Well, I guess they wouldn't be either, would they? Anyway, with clients, with customers. And there is just no excuse for not getting all the stuff done. It just takes a lot of practice to be able to do certain things very quickly while maintaining a level of quality control and having the discipline to get shit done before you go to bed.
Because it's all you, everything, right? The website, every step.
Well, the website, I do have a little help with a couple of people writing for me. They do some music recommendations. I do have a webmaster who looks after things in the background. Then for ongoing history, I have Rob, who is my technical producer. But other than that, it's all me. I do all my own books. And that's another thing too. I have to take care of all the business end of things. I do all my own business prospecting, and I don't have an assistant. I don't have help. I just plow through it myself.
And what intrigues me about that is in the 13 and a half months that I've been building What Was That? And I'm very conscious of the fact that this is a slow build. It's got to be shrewd, it's got to be calculated, and it's got to be realistic to where we're at in this part. It's just where we are in the world right now, let alone commercial broadcasting, internet broadcasting, and how people can be very quickly out of something and into the next thing. I mean, my dad said to me growing up that everyone's obsessed with the next upgrade, and I've only just got you this Nintendo 64. I don't know what a Sega is. Just settle down and just enjoy the 64 for now. We don't need to, we're in a throwaway society, you would say, like we're on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. Now, what intrigues me about what you've just shared is that something that I've had an interesting journey on the last year is allowing help, because this is born from a place of I want to dive into, I mean, YouTube has been my school. That's been my university of watching how to edit, whether that's Premiere Pro or how to do Photoshop work or how to become better at production, etc. I've just dived into learning as much as possible, and people reaching out and saying, oh, I can help, maybe like Eric in my community, like, oh, I've noticed some things on your website where this would help get more traffic on Google if you get these codings right. And Josiah saying, oh, I can help with some of these music. And Justin Perchlife, who's in Toronto, or Kitchener, just south of you, oh, I can make all your memes and your GIFs and whatnot. Have you had an experience along the way where people have tried to get involved and you've maybe pushed back for your own growth? Nothing scandalous or horrible or negative. And then how have you allowed certain people to come into your life to help with these certain avenues to have the flow move forward accordingly?
Good question. Andrew and Natalia, who are the people that help me out with the website, I wouldn't be able to do anything without them. I have offshored everything to them because they know what they're doing and I do not. Some people have come to me and offered to write articles for the website, which is great because that takes the heat off me. I try to maintain a certain number of stories on a daily basis throughout the week to make sure that I'm always pumping out content. So that's helpful. Most people want to do research for me. They want to do some ongoing history stuff for me. That's very tough because having done this since 1993, I have a very, very streamlined workflow. And I have found many shortcuts. I have found all the things that work. I have found all the things that don't work. And I don't really have time to teach people what my method is, simply because I'm not really sure what it is myself. I just know that what I'm doing and how I do it works really, really, really well. And frankly, I don't necessarily need any help because of this really refined workflow. If I was in the business of, I would like some cool gifts for the website, but, don't really need it. It's not really top of mind with me. Andrew takes care of all the coding and all the SEO for the website, so I'm okay with that. And beyond that, I do have somebody who is helping me acquire more speaking engagements and more hosting engagements, rather than me chase that business. Other than that, though, it's really hard to find somebody who really understands what I do and can work at the speed that I do without me having to spend 6 months teaching them how to do it. I don't even know if I can.
Yeah, I think you've got to a point where the solo adventure doesn't need an assistant.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Even my wife, who has been long suffering with me through this, she understands that I have this really accelerated process and knows how to contribute, but it's taken her 30 years to figure it out.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I mean, Jodie, my partner, that's the 70s inspiration you see behind me. She loves the gold and the yellow and the calming energy. And so usually most chats start with me having to describe what that painting is and where this carpet came from. But she has been colossal in allowing me to, when I first moved in here a year ago, I'd gone from my apartment downtown in the bachelor pad and went into the cupboard in the bedroom. We took all the clothes out and green screen, painted it and got it all ready. And I just felt so congested that led to her saying, well, why don't you come downstairs and take over the essential flipping living room? So it's very gracious of her for me to be able to do this. But it's the flow. That's where because, Alan, we've met each other and bumped in and talked here and there as you've come across. And I've tried to get to Toronto in the years when you've tried to help me get to radio stations out there and stuff. And you've seen me mainly be a single entity. And during the pandemic, I've fallen in love. And Jodie and her son Harley, who's 7, have welcomed me with open arms. We started, talking only a few months before lockdown. And so we decided to just leap in. And at the start of the bubble, well, fuck it. Let's see how this goes and let's grow into a relationship. And having known each other 3 months, and let's do it now. And that's where I've been for the last 13 months. And her support is paramount. And to get to my point off the back of what your answer was, is that having that flow to me, I put a lot of pressure on myself for that, making sure that come 3 o'clock, I try and end my work day at 3 or 4. I try and start my work day at 7. But it's like last week I spoke to Sophisticated Dingo and Lewis in Victoria, Australia. So I was up until 2 a.m. doing that chat, which was awesome. But then it's the knock-on effect. And so it's balancing out how mentally I stay grounded and refined to still attack and have fun doing what was that, but then still be present for when they're back because I love them so much. And so it's a really special connection. It sounds like you have with your wife for all these years that the flow works.
Yeah, both of us are extremely disciplined when it comes to time management. And that has come from many, many years working in the radio business. When I get up at 7 o'clock, I get up and get dressed as if I'm going to work. So no sweatpants. I get up and dress into something that I would wear to the office if I was still going to the office. I maintain a lunch hour. I maintain a couple of coffee breaks throughout the day. And then I try to end by 4:30 or whatever the time is. So that mirrors basically a standard sort of working day. Doesn't always work out that way. Like you say, there are some things that you have to do in the evening. For example, there's something I have to do tomorrow. Danny Goldberg, the ex-manager of Nirvana, has a new book and he wants to have a chat. And that's at 7 o'clock Eastern time. So that means the day is going to go a bit long, but that's fine because that gives me content for something in the future. And hopefully by having this content in the bag, I can shorten a day somewhere down the line.
Yeah, well, that sounds flipping sweet. And that goes back to an answer you gave several minutes ago about you have someone that helps you book these conversations. I find that fascinating because you're Alan Cross. Don't people come to you?
Well, they do. I mean, a lot of people do come to me. This interview, for example, did come to me because I have a relationship with Danny. I've talked to him before, and I get offers all the time from people. But then there are other things, the higher paying things, like the speaking engagements, that I do need help with. So I have an agent, actually 2 agents, that periodically bring me work.
Right, but you don't get paid for interviews.
No.
No, not unless it's like have you ever had a chance where someone's flown you? Well, I know you've been flown out, for goodness sake. Them Crooked Vultures is the first thing that comes to mind. But have you had a gig where someone's flown you out and been like, we'll pay you to MC a show and host like a record release show?
Nothing like that, but I have been flown out to do things. I've got 2 things planned for January and February, one in Banff and another one in Lake Louise.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so when you did the Dave Grohl interview recently, this is what fascinates me is, and this is not a negative slight at anybody, but since I stepped away from the commercial radio, to be frank, a lot of people thought I was insane. Thought I was mentally unbalanced. Like, why would you step out of something that, I mean, for me, I spent 20 years trying to get into, and the ferocity and the passion of which I then tried to build off the back of the Zone in being in Victoria. But I've found that relationships, they come and go, right? It's like you go to high school, you're not going to be friends with all your classmates when you graduate 20 years later. You're just not. It's just not going to happen. But for me, there's that thinly veiled insecurity, that unknown, where you're not entirely sure if a band is purely working the room because you're the guy behind the mic playing the songs, or if they've got a genuine connection with you. And I found that some bands, they weren't necessarily genuine. And as soon as I left the Zone and started what was that? Well, it was an unfollow, it was a goodbye, it was a we don't really want to do interviews anymore. And I'm not necessarily looking for, has that happened to you? I'm looking for, how have you, through all these years of interviews, solidified, and what would you say are thus genuine friendships with artists that maybe don't require a middleman? Dave Grohl might, just text you and say, Alan, let's shoot the shit over Storyteller.
Right. I have a number of those relationships with Canadian artists, especially ones from the 1990s who were kind of growing up with me when I was doing afternoons at the Edge in Toronto. So Rain Maida of Our Lady Peace, for example, Hugh Dillon of the Headstones, Matt Good, a whole bunch of those can rock bands of the 1990s. I could probably call up any time and have a shot. As for people who are international artists, I had for a while an ongoing dialogue with Courtney Love, but she's fallen off the radar for whatever reason. And there really aren't, I could probably call management companies and arrange something. I could call John Silva, or Gabby, his second in command at Silva Artist Management, and that can get me, Dave Grohl, Josh Homme, Beck, and any variety of others. But no, my feeling, especially being in Canada, when it comes to international stuff, is that these people will only reach out to you when they need you to do something for a particular territory. And that's fine. I get it. In many ways, I don't want to play the relationship game that seems to be pervasive amongst the American radio industry and recorded music industry. That just doesn't, I can't do it. I know people who can, but I'm not very good at it, and I can't get across the border. So it's, I'm very selective with the relationships that I cultivate. I'm doing some stuff with Sirius Satellite Radio on the Volume channel, the morning show there on Feedback. I might end up being a guest host for that sometime soon. So that's a good entry into the United States. In the UK, I have a couple of people I can call at the BBC, but no artists directly. So does that answer your question?
Every answer, every word amounts to something that is an answer, yes.
Okay, good.
But so that's interesting as well. Is that because you just don't want to spare yourself the mental?
Don't have the time.
I
don't have the time to do it properly. You really have to devote yourself to creating and nurturing relationships. It has been extraordinarily difficult, of course, during the pandemic because nobody can go anywhere. So you do your best to reach out to people online and through email so that you can maintain whatever tenuous relationships you have. And everybody's in the same boat. So at this point, there has sort of been an advantage to not being one of these in-person schmoozer hustlers. Everybody's in the same boat. So as a result, somebody like me, who doesn't engage in that sort of buddy chum thing, I'm pretty much on the same level as everybody else now.
And when you approach interviews, I find it fascinating that for the most part, I think you're very fortuitous if you get a chance to be in a position like you're on MTV or you're on The Edge, whether you're TV, radio, major publications, NME, Kerrang, etc. I find it fascinating that some will expect an answer. They'll expect an artist to just open up without any context of sharing as an individual why you might ask that in the first place.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Right. So what I find interesting about what you've just said there is that while you're not interested in cultivating and continuing relationships and smoozing to get the avenue of discussion in the first place, so then what's your look on, okay, you've spoken to Dave Grohl, Josh Homme across the last 15 years. How would you pinpoint that those two a built relationship that can open up and lead to the openness of the artist when you speak with them?
Well, there are 4 steps that you go through when you're interviewing an artist. Before even you tackle that, you have to understand that you are a proxy for every fan who wishes that they were in your place. So it's your job to get something out of the artist that no one else has. Tell me something new. Don't ask the same old questions. Find new avenues to probe what's going on. And that way you'll get unique content. So there's a 4-step process that I follow when I'm doing an interview. And you can't skip any of these steps. Step 1, you go into an interview and you behave properly. You're not overly friendly. You're not offensive. You just behave properly in the company of a stranger who is assessing you and trying to determine what kind of time you're going to give them. So that's 1, propriety. Second, you have to show competence. In the first few minutes of the interview, even before the tape machine starts running, you have to show that you know what you're talking about, that you're not some dumb kid asking some starstruck questions or highly inappropriate questions or anything like that. Once you do that, then the artist becomes comfortable. They're okay, I'm not going to have to worry too much about this person. I can just relax and not have to, panic whether or not this person's trying to nail me to the wall or is going to embarrass me or embarrass themselves. And once an artist is comfortable, then they begin to trust you. And when they trust you, they will tell you anything. So it's all about getting to that trust factor in 5 minutes or less. And that only comes with lots and lots of practice and a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, because in most cases, you've only got 5-10 minutes, period.
Well, I'm talking mainly about the interviews where I have 20 or 25 minutes. When you have a short interview like that, everybody on both sides knows that you're not really going to get a lot of meaningful content. You're going to get a comment, a soundbite, and goodbye. That's it.
So oh, sorry, Alan, interrupted. I was going to say, how did it differ? How do you differ between a longer and a shorter?
Well, the shorter ones, going in that all you're there is for a soundbite. Something maybe 30, 35 seconds long on a particular subject, in and out, get that if you can, and that's it. So don't expect more. When you have a longer interview, chances are there's a little bit of schmoozing off the top as people sort of get settled and get comfortable. And then there may be a little bit of talk or chatter or off the record stuff at the end. So that's a much more relaxed, less controlled environment.
Something that I used to do when I worked at the Zone was if I got a 10-minute interview, well, the way I go about sorting interviews, I mean, with someone like you, I don't write anything down. There's no need to. I know that we can just converse from prior connection, and I know that also I could ask the simplest question and get the most fantastic answer. So it's a simple one when speaking with someone like you. But when it comes to bands that I've only recently discovered, I'll speak for the likes of Calva Louise, Kid Capici, Sophisticated Dingo, the people that I've spoken to in the last week up to this chat. These are bands that I've discovered in the last year, and I like going in with that whimsical lack of detail, lack of context that I usually adore searching for, to actually have the time to converse when they've given me an hour and a half. Right, we can shoot the shit for 10, 15 minutes and then dive in, and all the questions start flooding to the front of my mind of the offshoots of where we go. But when I would approach 10-minute chats, it would be just for that. Like I was saying to my partner Jody the other day, that I might just smooze for 9 minutes, because then that last 40 seconds is going to give me the soundbite that I need. So I'd rather have the guest be comfortable and trusting to get what is a more powerful soundbite than try and fit in 58 questions in 10 minutes and have it be some sort of game show that's just not going to sit with them here, and it's not going to get them to share the nugget that I'm looking for. Yeah,
artists hate interrogations. If you can go into an interview with 40 questions and only use 2 of them, then chances are you've had a pretty good interview.
Yeah.
Because you've asked the right thought starter questions, you've listened to the response, and then you react to the responses.
Yeah.
So it becomes less of an interview and more of a conversation. And when you find yourself in a conversation with somebody, who knows what they're going to say? because once again, they're comfortable. And when they're comfortable, they trust you, and then they tell you anything. The short interviews are problematic because usually they are in a studio or an office somewhere, and they've lined up 10 or 15 interviews, one after another, bang, 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 bang. And it depends on where you are in that queue. If you're at the beginning, well, they're not really warmed up. If you're at the end, they're exhausted and they don't really care. They just want to get this over with. Somewhere in the middle is where you want to be. I'll give you an example. I did something with Chris Martin earlier this year.
Yes, I was hoping you would address this because his energy throughout all of those was almost inhuman. Back to you. Sorry.
Yeah. I got him in the middle of the day. So I got lucky. And fortunately, there was a common experience that we had that we could talk about, which again reminded him of who I was, how we once interacted, and the results of that interaction. So that brought him closer to being comfortable and trusting right off the top. So I was lucky there. But if I were to get, name an artist, Tame Impala, anybody you want to mention, who I haven't talked to before, well, they may know that, okay, this guy's apparently a big deal in Canada, but that's all they know. They've never talked to me. They've never had a chance to measure me up. They have no, comfort level with me whatsoever. Those ones are really, really tough. However, I will also say this. The bigger the artist, the better the interview they tend to be. For example, I had 7 minutes once with Liam Gallagher. And Liam, first of all, he didn't disappoint. He was as profane as you want him to be. When you talk to Liam Gallagher, you want him to be Liam Gallagher. And he did not disappoint at all. But he is a practiced interview subject. So he is able to jump right in, get into the zone, and peel off these interview sound bites really, really quickly. He's either been coached or he has a natural knack of answering questions during a short interview. So that's okay. I don't mind that at all. Other artists, Bowie was a great example. Bowie was able to direct the conversation in whatever direction he chose without you even knowing it. And at the end of the interview, you would look down at your questions and realize that you hadn't asked anything. And somewhere in the first 3 or 4 minutes of the interview, he had taken control and he had turned the interview into something that he wanted it to be without you even noticing it. And that was, that is a brilliant skill.
Yeah, there was a great chat he did with Michael Parkinson on ITV when I was a kid, where that was the first time I'd seen Bowie in an interview situation. And he was the show. He ran the show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fascinating.
Bono can be that way too. A typical Bono interview goes, I'll say, "Hey, Bono, what's up?" And that's it for the next 45 minutes. He just talks. Every single Bono interview I've ever had, he has talked constantly for 30 or 45 minutes. And then somebody from his posse will come in, grab him by the arm, and drag him out the door to his next appointment. And as he's being dragged out the door, he's still talking. So he's the easiest interview that anybody could ever hope to do. And some of these artists, the big ones, they have this uncanny, charismatic ability to make you feel like you're the only person in the entire world that matters when they're having this conversation with you. They look you in the eye, they address you by name, they completely seduce you with their charisma. Bono did that, Bowie did that, and a few other people I've run into. You just get swept up in the fact that you're talking to them, and they are, it's an interesting experience. And when the interview is over, you go, "What the hell just happened?"
Have you? We go back 10 minutes to when you're talking about how you can get starstruck, and you don't want to seem that when you're first going and orchestrating an interview. And I feel I've done a pretty good job my last 10, 12 years since I've got the chance to speak with some incredible bands and even some that are tattooed on my arm that were like on a bucket list that I gave to boss man Johnny when he first hired me at the Zone nearly 12 years back. And I've done okay, I think, in staying calm and not being too fanboy-y. But the one time that always comes to the front of my mind is when I went to see Arkells in Vancouver. This is like 3 years ago when Frank Turner was opening up for him. And from Million Dead 25 years ago, the first punk bands he was in, when he split away and went solo. And I did that. I don't know where it came from. We're backstage. I'm hanging out with Max and co. And in comes Frank. Frank, John's from England. He's always wanted to meet you. And I stood up and I went, "Hi, oh my gosh, you're so tall. Oh my gosh, I've loved Million Dead for 25 years, Frank." And I don't know where the fuck that came from. Have you had any moments like that in your career as well, where you're like, "Shit, Alan, come on, man"?
There have been a couple. I think maybe the first time I talked to Noel Gallagher.
Yeah.
Simply because I was so intimidated by his potential reaction to my questions that I wanted to soften them up. I'll give you one that not quite fanboyish, but unprepared, stupid young interviewer. Back in 1980, is he either 87 or 88? Leonard Cohen came back. Leonard Cohen had been in the wilderness for a number of years and had signed a new deal with Warner Brothers. And for whatever reason, at the age of 55, he was being marketed with this comeback as an alternative artist. So we had something called the CFNY Live mic back in the day, which meant that record company representatives would often bring around musicians. And when they showed up in the office, whoever was on the air dropped everything, and we had an immediate live interview. So I was working middays, and this particular day, Dale from the record label brought in Leonard Cohen. Now, I knew the name, and I knew that he had some songs back in the 60s, but that was it. I had no idea that the guy was so revered. I had no idea that his work was examined at the PhD level around the world. I had no idea that he was, once second only to Bob Dylan in terms of whatever it was that he was doing. So I'm a dumb 23-year-old kid. And he comes into the studio dressed in black sunglasses, smoking with these horrible French cigarettes. And I thought, this guy's really stiff. I'm going to have to break the ice. So the mic comes on and I say, "Welcome. This is another CFMY Live mic. We have Leonard Cohen with us." "Hello." "Hello. Would you mind if I called you Lenny?" And there was a pause. And he took a big drag on that horrible Gaulois and then blew the smoke into my face and pointedly said, "Don't." So that interview was a little rocky, and it was short.
What was the note from the PD after that, the program director? "What the hell are you doing?"
Well, oddly enough, there wasn't one. Because I don't think he needed to tell me.
Right. Yeah. Some lessons you
that
just
I
learned.
Screwed up massively.
Yeah. No, some lessons just come to you so hard that you don't need a second tap on the shoulder to just soak it in.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Good grief. Well, actually, I think that's a good segue into addressing radio. When we were talking in our email setting this thing up, and you were saying what a fascinating adventure modern radio is. I mean, during the last 18, 24 months, I mean, you were just blogging about it the other day as well. In looking back at the history of how radio has had to not necessarily combat, but develop and evolve and move forward. And what do you think is new and shiny the last 24 months? What has radio been working on out of the hub of Toronto in Canada?
I think what we've been doing is just trying to keep our heads above water. We don't know where audience behavior was going during the pandemic. It seemed to have gravitated back towards radio, although there was a real problem because nobody's commuting. So the number of people listening in their cars is down. We have to, what do we do about studio facilities? Do we have people in the studio? Do we have everybody working remotely? If we have everybody working remotely, how do we keep everybody together? How do we do air checks? How do we do, any of these things? So a lot of what's been going on with radio these last 20 months has been a grand experiment in decentralization, as well as trying to welcome back people who may have gone out of the habit of listening to the radio, but are back to it because they want updates on the pandemic and they want information about what's happening, in their local area. So that's really worked out well for radio. What I think a better question is, where do we go from here? Well, we'll end up back in studios, everybody, sometime soon. But that means we'll simply be back to figuring out the same sort of things that we were working on in 2019. How do we make non-customizable radio relevant for the 21st century? What do we do about streaming? What do we do about competition from satellite radio? What do we do with people who only listen to streams and don't really care about music other than songs that they like? We're going to have to go through, re-examine how radio is presented and the content that we present on radio, because things will have changed as a result of the pandemic. We don't know how they will have changed, but they will have. And it'll probably take us until the middle of next year before we're all sort of back to normal in studios and sort of, trying to do things the way they used to be, as well as trying to re-equip radio for the digital age in the second decade of the 21st century. What I've often said is that radio is still very powerful, very profitable, very popular, but at the same time, it needs to evolve into something more than what it is right now, which is kind of like trying to change the wings on an airplane that's flying at 38,000 feet. It is still flying, but those wings got to change, and you got to change the wings as you're still flying. So it's going to be interesting. It really is going to be interesting.
The balancing of artist compared to DJ is fascinating. And I don't think there's no ruling you can put on. If you've got a brilliant personality on the air, let them go. But what I find interesting is we had a company meeting 3-4 years ago, and it was like our yearly team meeting, and someone came in and pitched that Jim Patterson had hired to look into the future of broadcasting. And they were basically saying to us, what we need is to make this station potentially accessible to all genres and have audience completely control every song. That was one of the ideas that was pitched. So it was like mayhem. That's just absolute mayhem. And 2 words, hot garbage, bad idea, didn't like that idea. Because then also then the DJs, how do you fit in being the personality, the local news, the liners, let alone the music facts? You're prepping on the spot. Now, for me, I wouldn't mind prepping on the spot. I like trying to dig up a detail, but that couldn't necessarily live on long term. And then you look at the rise of stations in cities where they have got that Jay in the morning, or they've got that Dylan and Jason, whatever it might be, that really galvanizes people. And you look at a KAXP model that, yes, that's different in Seattle. That's born out of a university station that went a bit awry and didn't quite get their paperwork right, and then became a corporation. But the fluidity and the freedom still on point that they have from their PD, but to orchestrate an eclectic and different show every day. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to broadcasting, but there's so many things that we can look to the left and the right and seek growth from.
I think the worst thing that radio can do is become a playlist with jukebox with commercials.
Yeah.
That, when I hear radio stations that are voice tracked or automated and don't have a live announcer at the time, I cringe. I really, really do cringe, because that's not doing anybody any favors. You can't cut your way to profitability and relevance. I think that radio needs more stronger, compelling, interesting presenters to bring context to whatever it is that they're playing. I think that radio formats need to loosen up a little bit, especially when it comes to contemporary music, because there is if you're dealing, for example, with 18 to 34-year-olds, there is no one genre that they like. They're all over the place. So I pitched a number of years ago at the Ontario Association of Broadcasters something called Millennial Radio, which takes into account that there is much less tribal affiliation when it comes to music preferences than there was in the past. So, for example, when I teach at community college, one of the first things I do is I get everybody to pull out their phone and to give me the last 10 songs that they listen to. And it's shocking, because it'll be Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Cardi B, Beatles, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Greta Van Fleet, and then something else like The Weeknd. So there is this ecumenical musical taste that has become pervasive amongst young people. How do we as radio broadcasters try to accommodate those tastes when we've spent so many decades siloing music into genres and formats. It's going to be very difficult. It did happen once before, and that was with the Bob Jack formats, and now with the boom formats, where it's basically a mishmash of all kinds of genres. I mean, you can listen to boom in Toronto, hear Guns N' Roses Paradise City one day, and then 1 minute, and then next it's YMCA by the Village People, and it works. The number one station in the city. So if they can do it, why can't a contemporary music station do it? And if a contemporary music station does it, well, then it's not even new. It's back to the 1970s and what top 40 radio used to be. Top 40 radio played the best of all genres: country, rock, pop, whatever. And that made up your top 40. Is there a room? Is there room? Is there appetite? Is there a willingness to try something like that? I think somebody will at some point. Once they are, it'll be a station that's so desperate to shake things up that they'll try any new format. And it may be successful.
I know that station. But this is 4 or 5 years ago, when I think it's 5-6 years ago maybe, when the Peak launched in Calgary. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was Catherine Thompson. I'm sorry if I've got the name wrong, but
no, it's Kath. Yeah, Kath Thompson.
Which, when I was at the time, like, as you know, I've always been chomping at the bit to take the next step and try and keep growing, especially within the same company. And we had spoken at length, and she had said to me, as part of the sort of me trying to pitch to her and her pitching what she was going to build, is that she wanted to do just what you were saying the last few minutes, was to open up the floodgates here to having a truly open alternative station. So she wanted to dive into, yes, that modern rock sound, but also be very open to pop. So she would go from Said the Whale to Taylor Swift to Arkells to Foo Fighters to Ed Sheeran. And I think that she had a very clear plan, but she didn't necessarily get the time to really orchestrate that. And maybe Calgary wasn't the spot. But then again, everything needs time. How in radio can you, if you're gauging something, book to book, month to month, quarterly to quarterly,
it's not even that. I mean, with people meters, it's day to day. I mean,
in the major cities, yeah,
you get overnight ratings, and if you see that things are not working, well, there's always a knee-jerk reaction. There's no one at the helm saying, no, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. We can make this happen, but we need to have clear programming guidelines. Plus, we need to have a clear marketing message to whoever might want to listen to us. How are we communicating what we do to the general public? And if they don't do either of those things, you're screwed.
Yeah. And it's fascinating, you as well, saying that you get annoyed when there's not a real DJ, but 50% of this country right now, I mean, yes, the pandemic has opened the gates to more voice tracking and more DJs servicing 3 communities. But I do find it a touch sad when I know that part of the reason why I left my role was to, yes, keep growing and keep trying my own thing, but also in the hope that, knowing there would be cuts, that someone might get saved, particularly a young broadcaster, or knowing that when they can reopen again, they can bring in 2 or 3 young broadcasters. I used to go into meetings about trying to get a raise and trying to orchestrate getting the Zone Ranger to be made full time. Like, if you can find this wiggle room, I don't want the crazy money. I want the team to improve. So if you can bring me in and him in, I would. Those are the silly things I used to try and do. But I find it interesting then that, yes, okay, we need voices on the radio, but when you've got someone that's speaking to Toronto, Kitchener, all over Ontario, for goodness sake, and they're not really telling you exactly what's happening, but giving you a general gist of what, I mean, isn't that a dangerous disconnect to allow to happen for several months before the restructure?
I believe it is. That was sold on 2 premises. First, we're going to bring major market talent to your small town.
Yeah.
Second, we're going to make it much easier to meet your payroll each year because we're going to allow you to cut 2 or 3 people. The problem with this is just what you said. There is no local connection. There isn't. I know somebody who does 5 shifts simultaneously. How can you possibly be an attentive broadcaster if you're doing that? I want to know what happened, the minutia, the granularity of what happened in my community. I want to know that the person I'm listening to lives in the same place where I do, because then we have a shared experience. That's the human touch. It drives me absolutely nuts. And then when that person in Toronto or whatever leaves the business for whatever reason, where do you find talent? Where do you find up and coming talent? It used to be you would go to the medium and smaller markets to
Quite.
find that. And that it doesn't exist anymore. If, for example, you are a member of, if you have a big, it doesn't matter where you are. If you have, all of a sudden you need a morning show, where are you going to find a morning show in Canada? Where? There aren't any new morning shows up and coming. And that's a major problem. Mornings are where your bread and butter is. And if you can't find major talent to fill that day part, your whole station is in big trouble. Yet you've done nothing to try and cultivate and mature and nurture talents below this level.
It's something that, to be honest with you, has driven me up the wall. I have had so many wonderful souls reach out to me in the last year and say, can I do a show? And what I like about that, what's very kind about that, is that they look at what was that and think it's more grandeur than it really is. They don't, even though I'm very open about the fact that, yes, I have 67 recurring monthly subscribers in this moment with our conversation. I'm earning about $350 a month, but it's all split 50-50 to go to the foundation, to go to the Arts Academy, to help people 5 to 105 learn guitar, piano, etc. through the teachers I've got that do Zoom classes, all at whatwasthatradio.com. Well, hey. And the conversation I've had with at least 30 flipping people, Alan, the last year in private Zooms or whatever on Discord, is I've been in a system. I felt like I was working towards something, and I'm gone. I'm nothing. I've been pissed out, thrown out. There are people that were music directors and program directors in small markets, like a Nanaimo or a Comox or whatever on the island. That then they're just there with a badge. They're not actually doing anything. It's answering to the bigger machine. But that's what drives me crazy, is that's what got me into radio, as I get all flipping sitting up in my chair, but was listening to GWRFM, Swindon 102.1, driving around with my dad and being like, who is this guy? And then like Steve Wright on BBC Radio 2, like, who are these people? Chris Evans, Chris Moyles, just the attitude, the energy, the charisma. And these young broadcasters are only going to get the chance to dream of that edge position if they get the 4 or 5 years in Englehart, in nowhere, a town of 100 in Northern Ontario, to just work on the craft, put the time in. I don't think, Alan, and I don't know if I said this to you in an email a few months or years ago, I don't think I started making consistent quality shows until 8 years into my career. I'm in year 11 now.
I believe that you don't even know who you are on the air until you've done 5 years. And it takes, once you realize who you are in the air, it takes another couple of years before you figure out how to use those strengths to their advantage. So yes. And you want to be able to do those in smaller markets where you can make mistakes and not be, held terribly accountable by people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I worked my way up through all kinds of small towns on my way to Toronto. And the things that I learned along the way, I learned what I could do, I learned what I couldn't do, I learned what I wanted to do, and I learned what I didn't want to do. So, for example, my first full-time job, I thought I wanted to be a newsman, and I got to be a newsman for 23 days. And I hated it so much that when another job offer came along, I left so quickly that my landlord sent the sheriff after me for non-payment of rent. A lot of people want to start at the top. They want to start in big cities. Well, that's fine. If you get a job there, that's good. But then you become pigeonholed in whatever it is, the position that you get, and you don't get a chance to grow. And that's how people in that station will think of you, as the new person in this role, rather than somebody who has paid their dues by going from station to station to station. And let's not forget salary range. You get into a big station, let's say in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, whatever, and your salary is X. Well, you can probably stay there for a while, but you'll be getting your 2% increase every year. If you go from station to station to station, you have a much better chance of seeing larger increases in your salary and thus your lifestyle and standard of living than you would. But you would have a higher standard of living by the time you get to a large radio station than you would had you started at that large radio station.
Yeah, I actually used to work with someone called Heather Backman, no relation to Randy, and as she made very clear on her first day. She works at Jack FM here in Victoria now. Initially was on the afternoon show with Ryan at the Q in the Zone. And when I was speaking to her about her career, I was like, oh my gosh, you've been all across the US, all across Canada. You've worked every type of genre station there is. What is radio to you? And she went, It's an adventure. It's just an excuse for me to get city to city. I love doing a year to 2 years. She's like, I don't do anywhere for more than 3 years. And that's what she's done the last 20 years, is just go all around North America and be on radio in Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. It's fascinating. Whereas to me, it's more like...
how much knowledge and ability and talent has she managed to gather, managed to acquire during that adventure? God, it's good for her. That's the way to do it. At some point, you're going to have to settle down, because a program director will look at you and say, this person hasn't been at a job for more than 3 years.
Yeah.
Time. But eventually, yeah, I mean, why not?
No, it's fascinating. Well, we're all just going about living our lives our own way, and whatever brings us the most joy and growth. And I think that one of the biggest lessons I've learned the last 10 years of broadcasting is how much of the subconscious ego I didn't realize was propelling some of the wish of what I genuinely wanted to do from a positive position. In that you get wound up into like, oh yeah, like Max Markel says, I'm his West Coast guy. Or like this band and this band didn't speak to anyone else in Canada. They only spoke to me. And that's the fickle line that you're wandering down. And that's why I love the way that you've addressed at the start of this conversation that no, I've got my time and my plan, and I'm not too worried about that. Whereas what led to you answering that was me saying, oh, I've been a little bit hurt by some relations that have gone astray. So that's what I love so much about what was that, is that it's just in the moment, make a new show every day, have a wonderful conversation with people multiple times a week. In this case, it's you, Alan Cross, and just go about growing.
One of the things that kills a lot of radio careers is ego. They think that the radio station can't exist without them. They think that they're God's gift to humanity when it comes to broadcasting. That's not true. Everybody's got a best before date on their forehead, and it is your duty as an individual radio person to push back that date as many times as you can over the course of your career. You may be able to do it for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or whatever. I'm at 40, but there were a lot of times where I thought that I had reached my best before date, yet I managed to recover somehow. I've been extraordinarily lucky. I would not advise anyone to follow anything that I've done, because it has been unique to me and my experience and my career path. But, two things that I've learned: you're never bigger than the radio station that you're working for. You're always replaceable. And number two, don't be a dick. That's one of the most simple lessons you can learn. Don't be a jerk. Don't be an ego-ridden asshole, because that will see you out the door faster than anything else.
But a lot of people sometimes get confused between passion and confidence and ego. Mm-hmm. Have you encountered that in the last 40 years? How have you dealt with that?
Well, me, I mean, for the longest time, my attitude was, oh, listen, I'm on the air. I'm on the front lines. I hear and see what the audience wants. I know better than you people in the back offices. Why don't you listen to me? Well, that was a dumb, ego-ridden position to take, because I would get mad and I would get frustrated, and that would affect my relationship with my managers. Eventually, I mean, at one point, I think I held the record for the most number of bad attitude meetings without ever getting fired. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long time to realize that, no, that's not the way to go about it. Do what you're told. Don't get upset about it, because ultimately it's not your fault. You're not the one that's going to be held responsible for it. And help and be cooperative and do the best you can to help everyone succeed, rather than worry about your own ass.
Something I really battled with in the last 2 or 3 years that led to me leaving. There was multiple reasons, and just on the off chance anyone that I used to work with is watching, I love you still. One of the things that started to really gripe was that I would get the chance to have these incredible interviews. And one thing that Brian and Johnny always did was spread around the interviews, but there came 3 or 4 or 5 back-to-back. AWOL Nation, Black Pumas, 21 Pilots all said, we want me. And I was a bit flabbergasted by that. But that created some tension. And I tried to palm those off, and City and Colour and other ones, I tried to just spread it around. It was like, no, it's either you or it's no one. And it was so devastating that some people thought that it was just my ego, like, oh, I'm the interview guy, I'm this, that, and the other. And I'm just talking from a place of being proud when I, go on the air and say, oh, I had a great chat with Josh the other day. Have you ever had any of those things? Because you've got some absolutely behemoth, some huge interviews over the years. I mean, I know that you weren't going to necessarily dive in and you'll share what you share, but there's got to have been some instances where there's been some friction. You've had to find a system to deal with that and just keep being you, knowing that you're not an asshole. This is just your job that you love.
Here's what happened. If I'm doing a program like the Ongoing History of New Music, then that immediately gives me a little bit of a leg up, because I will be talking to people for a specific program that I host. So if it came that I had an opportunity to talk to Robert Smith, the Cure in London, well, who are they going to call? The guy who is probably going to do an album release special and multiple Cure shows for Ongoing History. So no, there really wasn't a problem with me, because I had been sort of, for a long time, I was designated the go-to interview guy,
right,
for certain artists. Then we had somebody else doing a program called Live in Toronto, who would be I would call her the senior interviewer, because that was the nature of that program, 2 hours every night, 6 till 8. And if anybody was in town, she would talk to them, and that's fine. That's her job, and she was designated as being that person. So, okay, fine. But for other things, it would be me. And there was never any tension from what I remember. That's because management had made these specific designations. You do this, all you other people, you just worry about what's happening on the air for your show.
Yeah, communication. That's what's so fascinating, is that I've been in an industry, and you have for 40 years, me for over 10, of communication. And a lot of the time, a lot of the negative energy is created by lack of communication.
Yes. Yeah, for communicators, radio people can be very bad communicators.
I think a lot of the time people just think gestures are all you need, like, coming up to the window glass.
Yeah, part of the issue too is that today's program directors and general managers have so much on their plate that what they want to be able to do is just get the shit done for the day, just get it off their plate, because there's just so much coming down the pike that, oh God, I'm so overwhelmed. So I have a certain amount of, and having done it, I have a tremendous amount of empathy for people who are program directors and managers and general managers and music directors, because, it used to be that you were in charge of one station. Now maybe you're in charge of 2 or 3 or 4. How do you simultaneously program 4 radio stations? And some of those stations may not even be in the same city. Oh my God. So as a result, I mean, these people are only human. They can't be cloned. They can't be in 2 places at the same time. So they just do their best to get through the day.
Yeah, and then there's that really rare specimen of the case of Rick Lee, who just seems able to do anything 24/7. It's like there's 28 hours in a day.
And those are rare people. And when you find one, you hang on to them really tight. You make sure that they're happy and engaged and find their job rewarding, because they come along very, very infrequently.
Cognizant we're into the last 5 minutes of the time you gave. What came to mind from that answer and that share just then is, in this little write-up you did, looking back at the last 40 years, you didn't really touch on that side of management. What galvanized you in the first place to take the next step? And then why then did you choose to fuck that?
Okay, because when I got into the business, the idea was you started in a small town, then you got to a bigger town, you may end up doing all nights, and then you would graduate to evenings and middays, and then maybe a drive program in afternoons or maybe mornings. And if you chose to continue to be in the business, well, then the next logical step was to become a music director or a program director. That was the career path. It was what everybody was supposed to do. That's what I did. So in 2001, I became transitioned from being an afternoon guy to the program director at Y108 in Hamilton. Did that for 3 years. And of course, once you do something in a smaller city, you want to be in a big city. So then I got to go and be the program director at The Edge for almost 5 years. And the pressure back then was so intense that I was only the second person to be a program director at that station to escape without getting a divorce. That's how intense it was, because it was a 24/7 thing. There were so many specialty programs happening. There were so many interviews happening. There were so many events happening. And then you had, some major market talent that really needed you to ride shotgun with them. A lot of insecure people that needed, calming down all the time. And then, of course, you had a general manager and a head of radio who were very oriented towards sales. So if they're oriented towards sales, they may have some biases against, your efforts to program the radio station the way you want to. And if you didn't make your numbers, if you didn't make your ratings, well, then the pressure intensified. So I did that for 5 years, and then an opportunity came to go and do something different. They had created a new division that was dealing exclusively with online content. So I went there for 3 years, which was much less pressure, but at the same time had very little direction, because things were so up in the air when it came to technology and the course of where radio was going in this brave new world. So as I was in that business, the iPhone was introduced, Facebook took off, YouTube took off. Radio station websites went from proprietary platforms to off-the-shelf platforms like WordPress and Squarespace. Streaming came along. So there was a lot happening very quickly. And for a legacy industry like radio, it was very, very hard to adapt, because things, we just didn't have the bandwidth to move as quickly as technology was iterating. And then in 2011, they decided that, no, this is just too much trouble. We're going to disband the entire thing. And that put me out of work for 3 years. And I went and did a whole bunch of other things on the side. I helped put Indie 88 on the air in Toronto. Did some work for a streaming company called Songs, basically, hand to mouth for a while before I came back. Hang on just a sec. Hello.
Hi, is this Alan?
Hi, can you give me a call in about 5 minutes, please?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Bye.
It's a CBC. I have to talk to somebody about Adele's album on the CBC.
Yeah, I was going to just joke that you've even got a fucking alarm set for when you're done. We got to go. Next thing. Go.
No. So, and then when Chorus asked me back, I didn't go back as an employee. I became this independent contractor, which has allowed me to have much more control over my career. And I can follow the career path that I want.
Yes.
And it's taken me a very long time to get to this position. People who hire me trust me that I will remain disciplined, get the work done, do it in a quality way, and they won't have to, be looking over my shoulder all the time. And that's one of the reasons I maintain this discipline, is so I can continue to have the trust of the people who pay my money or pay my invoices.
Quite. Well, I've got 3 other questions inspired from that answer, but cognizant of the time, which I'm so grateful for, and the CBC Adele chat you got to do now. You like the new album then?
I've heard bits and pieces of it. I really appreciate what Adele does. It's not my kind of music, but I understand it's very, very good for what it is. And as a person, I think she's great. I just adore this woman.
Have you spoken with her?
No, I haven't. But everything I've ever seen about her, the candor, the language, the attitude, yeah. I think she's so refreshingly approachable and normal. And that's what I think is going to see this album actually sell, physical copies when it comes out on Friday.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, look, that then leads me to questions about talking about vinyl pressing plants, but we don't have time for that. You've got to go and speak to CBC.
We can pick this up at another time.
Yeah, exactly. Alan, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you to all that have watched. We'll dive in and analyze and talk about the chat with Alan when you're gone, but have a fabulous rest of your day in Toronto. And I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Anytime, John. Anytime.
All right. Ciao for now.
See ya.
Bye. Well, thank you so much for being here, and have a fabulous rest of your day. For I feel like I need to make something rhyme, but I don't know what else to say. Okay. Whatever you do in the rest of your day, please, as always, look after yourself. Hope there's some fun and smiles involved in the rest of it too, because we've got to cherish that positive. For now, cheerio.